Hello, everyone. In our last lecture, we introduced you to the topic of deceased estates. Now we want to go to dig deep into the types of beneficiaries that we might see in a deceased estate. So our first type of beneficiary is what we call an ascertained beneficiary. This is defined in terms of Section 11 to the Income Tax Act. So what is an ascertained beneficiary? This is a person who has an immediate right to ownership of an asset in a deceased estate. He acquires the right to inherit the specified asset. Okay, so maybe the will is saying, okay, upon my death, the house in Bulawayo is going to Victor. So that one becomes, Victor becomes an ascertained beneficiary. Soon after the death of the individual, for practical reason, we are saying the day after the death to say if the date of the death is today, which is the 3rd of July 2021, the 4th of July 2021, that's when the ascertained beneficiary acquires the right to ownership of the asset, and whatever income that accrues from that asset is going to be taxed in the ascertained beneficiary's hands. The beneficiary also has immediate right to present and future income from the inherited asset, and he is therefore taxed on income earned from that asset from the day after death of the deceased. The second beneficiary that we have what we call the beneficiary with a contingent right. So the first point to note, if the beneficiary has got a contingent right, the beneficiary himself is not taxable, is not taxed, because the contingent right might say this asset is going to be transferred to my son when he attains majority. So up to until the son attains majority, he cannot be taxed on whatever income which is accruing because of that asset, because of this contingent right. Or it might say, until my son marries. So there are chances that the son might not even marry, in which case no income will accrue to him. So we say the beneficiary is not taxed. Whatever income accrues to that asset, where the beneficiary has got a contingent right, we cannot therefore tax that income in the hands of the beneficiary with a contingent right. So the provision will be saying the estate is taxed until they are paid. So what happens is, since we are not going to tax the beneficiary, who are we going to tax then? Because what is clear is we have to tax the income. And the Act says we are going to tax the estate itself until the happening of the said event, and we said in that case, e.g., until my son marries. We said he may never marry, in which case he will never enjoy the inheritance. Income cannot be said to be held for his benefit. Okay, now we are going to cover the third beneficiary that we have is a beneficiary whose benefit is postponed. So that's the example that I was giving, where we are saying, okay, the asset is going to be transferred to my son up until when he attains majority, maybe the majority is attained at 20 or 18 years. So up until my son attains 18, that's when you are going to transfer the asset to my son. That's when we say the benefit has been postponed. What is the difference between this beneficiary whose benefit is postponed and beneficiary with a contingent right? Okay, so when the beneficiary has got a contingent right, we say there are chances that whatever event that is said in the will might not even materialize. Like in this case, we gave an example to say, until my son marries, there's a chance that the son might even die before marrying, or might not even marry at all. So we have a contingent right. That's why we say we cannot tax the son, because the income that is accruing cannot be said to be held for his benefit. But in a where the beneficiary as right is postponed, we are saying it's certain uh, that the time will come, but it is postponed for now. E.g., until my son attains 30. So again, we have two scenarios under the beneficiary whose benefit is postponed. The first scenario is where the will provides that in the event of death of the beneficiary, the said inheritance will pass on to the beneficiary's own heir. So okay, so when the benefit is postponed to say maybe until my son attains 30, it might uh one might ask that what if the son dies before attaining 30? Is that not a contingent right then? Okay, that's why we have two scenarios here. So the will might say, if it happens that my son dies before attaining 30, then whatever asset is going to be given or transferred to my son's heir. That is the first scenario. Then, so on this first scenario, what do we do? Who do we tax? We tax the son, we tax the beneficiary, because by default, he is an ascertained beneficiary. Because if he doesn't attain 30, his heir is going to attain 30. So by this virtue, he is an ascertained beneficiary. Then the second scenario is where the will does not provide for the passing on of the inheritance to a beneficiary on heir. Okay, so in this case, it just says, okay, until you are going to transfer this asset when my son attains 30, and it ends there. What if the son dies before attaining 30? Okay, so that's the scenario that we have here. So who do we tax in this case? We tax the estate. There is no ascertained beneficiary. So the way we treat the second scenario is exactly the same way we treat the beneficiary with a contingent right. The first scenario, we treat it the same way where we have an ascertained beneficiary. The fourth beneficiary is what we call usufruct beneficiary. So what is a usufruct beneficiary? The beneficiary has a right to income but not to ownership or inheritance of the asset. So for example, a man might say, okay, the house in Harare is going to be transferred to my son, but whatever income that accrues from that house is going to be given to my wife until her death. So the asset is transferred to the son's name, but income is retained by the deceased's wife until her death. So that one, we call it a usufruct beneficiary. The wife becomes a usufruct beneficiary because the wife has got a right to income, but not to ownership of the asset itself. So we said, e.g., a father may leave a house to his son, but grant his widow a life usufruct. It implies the widow has the right to stay in the house or otherwise use the house until she dies. So how do we tax a usufruct beneficiary? The widow will be liable for tax from the house until her death. Okay, so until the widow dies, we are going to tax whatever income accruing from the house in the hands of that widow. Then, number 5, the fifth beneficiary is the estate itself, or the residue in estate. What is this? Any property of the deceased that is not willed to a specific person forms the residue in estate. Okay, so the deceased might have said in the will, okay, this asset is going to this asset is going to this is going to be transferred to a trust, this is going to be transferred to my wife, this is going to be transferred to my son. But maybe after transferring all those, we still have assets that are not yet distributed to beneficiaries. So how do we tax a residue in estate? In an estate, the deceased estate is taxed on any income produced by assets in residue from the day after the death until the date of final distribution by the executor. The beneficiary is not identified on the date of final distribution of estate and therefore only taxed on income from the asset from that date. Then the sixth, we have what we call intestate beneficiary. This is a person who dies without leaving a will. Okay, we have this scenario where a person dies without leaving a will, and we describe him as an intestate. So what do we do where we don't actually have a will? We tax the estate. What about the seventh scenario is exactly the opposite to the sixth scenario, where all assets are located to specific individuals. The estate is taxed on income up until final distribution. Therefore, the ascertained beneficiary is taxed from date of final distribution of the estate. So this is the general framework of how we tax estates. We accumulate the income after the death. We deduct income distributed to ascertained beneficiaries. We deduct incomes accruing to a will trust. Then whatever that remains becomes the income accruing to a deceased estate. So we are going to tax the deceased estate from that income. So that was all about the types of beneficiaries that we have in deceased estates.